So, hi everyone, I hope you still have some energy left even though we skipped the coffee break. As a startup that has been founded a little bit more than a year ago, I'm super excited to have the chance to speak here at the FinTech Week Vienna about the topic of financial health and about how certain mechanisms, namely nudging, could help people to improve their financial decision making. My name is Martin, I'm one of the founders of Monkee, and with Monkee we have the mission to help people to improve their financial health by bringing saving and spending back into a more sustainable balance. So in the first step we developed a saving app that uses digital nudges in order to help people to save more money for concrete target in their future. Before Monkee, I worked 15 years in the consumer goods industry, and there I spent quite some time and energy in development and marketing products that are beautiful but are not really essential in your life. And there I also had the chance to dig quite deep into the topic of consumer psychology. And when I became father, I started thinking a little bit about what else I would like to do in life, and which creates a little bit more impact. And I started to think about whether certain mechanisms that are currently used by the consumer goods industry to stimulate people to buy stuff, whether they could also be used to help people to save more money for the future. And this was the reason why we started Monkee. And I digged into the topic of nudging, and this is where I would like to share a few insights with you today. But first I would like to go back one step again, why financial health is even an issue. And this boils down to those many small and large daily decisions, how I spend my income, what I'm going to do with my income. So you can either spend it, which means consumption now, or you could keep it for the future, which means consumption in the future. And I was talking to a lot of different people, and I learned that there are so many who would love to save more money, but who think they can't afford saving because at the end of the month there is no money left. At the same time, they are spending quite a significant and sometimes even shocking amounts of money on impulse purchases because it just costs €4, because the shoes are on sale and I'm saving 25%. So this means that when it comes to those daily decisions, very often consumption wins over saving. And the question is, why is this the case? And of course, there are several reasons for that, and I just would like to highlight two. The first reason is that today it is fair to say that it's technically easier to spend money than to save money. So you mentioned we are bombarded with several thousand messages every day. We can buy stuff with one click. Data is used to target us with a precision that is unprecedented. And if we can't afford that, we just add 2 more clicks and we finance it, even though we don't have the money for that. And at the same time, when it comes to innovation on the saving side is years behind innovation on the consumption side. Just having a look how much money companies like Amazon, Facebook are investing into further improving kind of the purchasing processes. And so this is the technical reason for that, but there's also a psychological reason to that. And this goes back to the model that has been developed by the Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman, what he calls dual process. Meaning that at every decision we're taking, there are 2 processes fighting against each other. And at one process, this little guy is more under control, Mr. Spock. So he is the more rational, logical guy, building his decision on very rational reasoning. And this is how economists want us to see, Homo economicus. But there's also a second guy fighting with Mr. Spock. And this guy shares more traits in common with Homer Simpson. So he's very spontaneous, very fast in deciding, takes a lot of mental shortcuts, and is building a more quick and dirty picture of the reality. And here are just a few examples. When we are driving a very long, straight road, we don't have to think about driving. So this is when Homer Simpson is under control. Or when we have to complete the sentence black ant, or when we have to answer the question 2 + 2 =, or the facial expression that we're making when we're seeing a really horrible picture. So we don't have to think about that, this just happens. Mr. Spock is under control when we're driving a curvy road, or when we have to give away our email address or telephone number, or when we have to compare different options for a flight. So this requires some time for thinking, this requires a lot of energy, and this means that, unfortunately, at many of those daily decisions, Homer Simpson wins over Mr. Spock because he's much faster, requires much less energy, and his decisions are on a more subconscious level. And this leads to a lot of negative consequences. You already mentioned that, Alexandra. Debt levels are at an all-time high. Money worries are already a #1 factor for stress, harming a lot of relationships and are negatively impacting work performance. And this is not just for the very low income group, but based on a study by ING for more than 350 million people. So more than 350 million people could profit from tools and solutions that help them to take better financial decisions or better prepare them for future or current financial needs. When we are talking about investing, we are more or less talking about the 6% of people, and those 8% of people here, even nudging can't help. They need completely different solutions. And so what's a nudge? So based on theory, a nudge is kind of a soft push to bring people towards more sustainable habits, more healthier habits. It could be a reminder, an alert, a question, a warning, and this is a very famous example of a nudge. So if you have been at Schiphol Airport, they put those small flies at the toilets, and just by putting them there, they reduced spillage by over 80%. So we see that sometimes nudges are super small differences in the way how you're structuring a certain offering, which have a huge impact. And I'm going to talk about more nudges in the financial area. This is just a very famous case. So why are nudges important? Because when it comes to tackling financial health, usually there are different ways how to tackle this issue. So one way is to create a better overview of your financial situation. So this is what banks are already doing within their apps, where they're structuring your expense side, that you know where the money is going. Second set of alternatives, developing capabilities. So financial literacy, building up that kind of preparing people to better know what they should do. But there's a big issue that there's this huge intention chasm between knowing what I should do and actually doing that. So just talking about our private life, I know that I should do more sport, I know that I should eat more healthier food, but I'm really having issues doing that. So, and when it comes to financial literacy, there's already a lot of research showing that financial literacy is super important. People are learning things, people are remembering things, but it's quite ineffective when it comes to actually impacting behaviors. And this is where nudging comes into place to really cross kind of this bridge from knowing to doing. And when is nudging most effective? There are usually 3 use cases. When we see the benefits now and the costs later. So that's why we love eating unhealthy food. It tastes great, and the costs are just coming later. But this is also why we love buying stuff, because it satisfies our need for instant gratification, and the cost with regards to not having the money for bigger issues in the future is just coming later. Another big use case for nudging is when we encounter decisions we make very infrequently. Usually when we have the chance to practice something, we are getting better. But the problem is that many huge decisions in our life, they don't come very often. Usually we decide on our university ones. We only have the chance to start early saving for retirement ones, even though there are some ways to adapt at the process. And usually we decide on financing a house once or twice in our lives. And the third use case is when there is not enough feedback or when it's difficult to predict the outcomes. So just take a retirement plan as an example. It's very hard for us to imagine how the decision today affects our purchasing power when we are going to be retired. And those are all use cases where nudges are super effective when it comes to actually impacting purchasing behavior, saving behavior. And the good thing is that there's a lot of research done about kind of mental biases which build at the end of the day the base for effective nudging. And today I would like just to use the remaining minutes to show a few nudges more on an exemplary level to show kind of how nudging in the financial area could look like. A first nudge that is super effective is to choose how your defaults. So there's a lot of studies that whenever companies are already selecting one option as a default, there's a very high chance that people are going to stick with that and are not going away from that. And if you are good in choosing the default with the best intents of the users, this is something that is super effective to help people to improve their financial decision making. This is one example within our app. So for example, we are sending push notifications to our customers and say, hey, what about saving €6 for your next vacation or your driver's license? And we see whatever number we recommend, if it is within a certain area, there's a high chance that users are going to stick with that. And we are now using machine learning to really find out which type of customers, which amount should be there in order to improve chances that they're pushing yes and saving more money towards their saving targets. This is another example of a very effective case where defaults played a role, which is this opt-in, opt-out decision. So this was the case of an employer who realized that he has a real issue within his workforce when it comes to financial health. And he developed a program where he said, okay, from now on, I'm going to take 5% of your loan and put it into a savings account. You can decide to opt out for that, but the default was opting in. So even though it was super easy to just opt out to that, a lot of people within the workforce just stay within the program and over time build a certain financial backpack in case a car breaks down, a wash machine breaks down, whatever. So by smartly deciding opt-in, opt-out, this already helps a lot to support financial decision making. Another very important nudge or concept is framing, meaning that the way how you are framing numbers makes a huge impact on the decision making. We just can recall the way how charities are framing the numbers. So you're not paying 365 at WWF a year, but €1 a day, which at the end is the same result, but the way how you frame that makes a huge difference in decision making. And how we are using that, for example, so if a user wants to save money for a driver's license, we are breaking this money down into more motivating weekly targets. And we see there's a huge difference if people have to save €1,500 or $9.49 a week. Even though it's the same result, you're putting this number into a different context, making it smaller, making it look more manageable. And we saw people who really can't do this math to break down a longer term financial target into what does this really mean on an everyday basis. Another nudge that is super strong is mental accounting. So we know that whenever we're having money on our current account, there's a high chance that we're going to spend it for whatever. And studies shows that as soon as we start clustering this money and put a label to that, people are sticking to this label. So if we say there is a bucket saying, okay, this €300 are for our monthly grocery, there's a very high chance that people are not using this money for something else, but for monthly groceries. So kind of breaking up certain budgets into smaller buckets is already also another nudge, helping people to better manage their finances within one certain category. Putting decisions into context. So this is, I mentioned this already, it's super difficult for people to predict the long-term effect of daily decisions. So this famous a coffee a day and what you could buy with this amount of money if you would have just saved it for 10 years or invested it for 10 years. So what we are doing is, we have a savings calculator, so when someone says he wants to save for something, we are breaking it down and say, okay, this corresponds to 3 coffees a week. And suddenly, it becomes very kind of manageable. People start thinking about 3 coffees a week, that's not a lot. I can just skip that and save for my vacation that I otherwise couldn't have afforded. Priming bias, and then I'm coming to the end. We strongly our decisions are very much based also on what we see or hear before taking decisions. So just asking people whether they're going to vote increases the chance that they're going to vote. And we are currently doing a lot of research around, could we ask people what they're saving for, whether they should save, and is this going to influence their actual saving decisions? So I still have a question mark there. There's a lot of research that shows that why shouldn't this be the case? Because we've seen a lot of other different areas that it works, and we are now researching around that. Anchoring and bracketing, and then I think that's it. So we highly act on pieces of information we have, even though this information has nothing to do with the actual decision. So there were studies where people had to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number, which is a completely random number. And after that, they were participating at an experiment where it was about how much they're willing to pay for certain products. And the result was that the higher the last digits were, there was a 40% higher willingness to pay for certain products, even though those digits had nothing to do with the product itself. And this is something that companies are using a lot by throwing, when it comes to purchases, throwing in certain numbers to prime you and in order to increase your willingness to pay for something. And we are now trying to translate that into savings. So for example, the numbers that you're going to see within the app, there is a reason why we're putting something in between, a number here and there, and we are now doing creating data in order to find out how certain numbers in context are going to increase the willingness to save for certain things. And so this is not really the last thing. Social norms, it makes a huge difference if we as Monkee tell you what you should do or should not do, or if we say people who are similar like you are doing this or that. We know it from Amazon, it works super strong. People who buy this also bought that. It's not Amazon telling you that. And how we are using that is to say, okay, people who are similar like you are saving for this and that. And this already acts as a strong nudge because I want to be like people who are similar like me. Or trying to compare people who are similar like you are spending this amount of money on going out for dinner during a month, and you are much higher compared to that. So this is a super strong kind of psychological nudge to steer certain decisions of consumers. So I am super convinced that the answer to financial health is not just nudging, but it is kind of the combination of financial literacy, building up the capabilities, but then also using smart nudges to actually really influence saving behavior of consumers. So if you like, you can download the app, it's for free, and I'm happy to take your questions now.